Now, there's a flyer. No, it's not a question of the folder.
He's the one that have to live in Century Village.
That depends.
The case with Rabbi Yasko Judy was that.
Gentlemen, let's get on with our learning, okay? We can discuss stuff like that afterwards if you like. What I can tell you and what I can't tell you. Getting sponsors, Sarah Alpert, your free year of learning. Sarah Alpert, in memory of her husband, Harav Tzvi Lipa ben Hillel. Bella and David Adler, in memory of her father, Ayel ben Yosef Cohen. Friends of Honey Chaifetz, Chana Shoshana Bad Yosef. Friends of Giants, Yaakov Yitzchak ben Shmuel Dov. Friends of Sandy Davidoff, Shalom Bad Chaim Eliyahu. Friends of Judy Cohen, Yudit Liba Bat Moshe. Friends of Dr. Netza Fransky, Chana Bad Ephraim Fischel. Gail and Leslie Kaplan, Mushka Sprinzer Bad Yosef Chaim Bechava, Hanan ben Moshe Eliezer Bechana. Pesha Bashmo Yitzchak Alevi Vitzipora, Isha ben Yom Moshe Cohen Bechana. Friends of Linda Katz, Hinda Bat Yehoshua. Correct?
You have to go back probably a couple.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do that also partly to get my head back into the Gemara. Okay. 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 Where should I? That's a good question. How about in Century Village, Boca? Okay. Let us start this morning, given our situation. I'd like us to pick up on really Lamed Daled Amud Beis, 3 lines from the very bottom. I guess that would be an art scroll, probably 34B3 or B4, right? Something like that. Maybe B5. B5, right? Okay. On the 3 lines from the bottom, we start Dinin if I showed Danin Biyom. Okay. Right. Right. Okay, so if we start there, okay. Right, so we all understand the flow of the Mishnah has to make the distinction between Dinei Mamonot and Dinei Nefashot. Okay, and while the Mishnah started off by telling us that there should be one law for both, it then listed quite a number of distinctions between the two. And as the Gemara is continuing, it's pointing out the distinctions, trying to clarify what the basis is for each. So in doing so, we come now back to that the Dinin Nefashot, we said Danim Bayom, yes, they are judged during the day, and then the result, the judgment comes out the next day. Okay? And we saw already a discussion that at night, if it's a capital case, the rabbi Dayanim were expected to continue their discussion through the night, eat a minimum amount, drink a minimum amount, and then be prepared the next morning, okay, or that morning, to each give their statements. We also have seen that unlike Dinei Mamonot, where somebody could change their stand, that we've been told that if you have been a Dayan arguing for a conviction, okay, you maintain your position for conviction. But that that particular Dayan could change to acquittal. But that's what I'm saying. But if you had been arguing for acquittal, you cannot change your statement for conviction.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
From acquittal to conviction?
It's kind of re-litigate.
Well, let's see. We're gonna clarify that. Okay? Right? The Gemara wants to, part of the question Micah's bringing up to us is where the Gemara says, at what point are we dealing with? Are we dealing only with the deliberations, or are we dealing with the final statement of decision of sentencing? Okay, all right. So that's what I said. I've got to get my head back into the Gemara. Minani mili. That's the basis, says the Gemara. Okay, that we say that the case is adjudicated during the day, and the sentence must be rendered during the day. I'll say it that way, right? What happens? Okay, Amar Rav Shemitz Bar Chaya, he says a makra based on pasuk. Okay, 34, next to the last line. That's what we're going to get to, right? If you wear Hoka sneakers, you now know that they're really called hanging sneakers. Okay? All right. Yeah. Okay. Vahoka otem lashem neged hashemesh. It says that they were hung opposite Hashem during the daylight. Okay? So what happens? Amar Rav Chisda, this is Rav Chisda. Minayim lahoka'ah shahid tiliyah. How do we know that the phraseology of the word, the lashon of hoka'ah, implies hanging, that they're being hanged? Because elsewhere we have a pasuk that says there in regards to the sons of King Saul, Vahoka anum lashem begiv'at Shaul b'chor Hashem, right? That they hang them up, okay, unto the Lord in Gibeah, Saul, the chosen of the Lord, right? Uchtiv, and now we get to Lamed Hey, Amud for today. Uktu, Tiv, what happens, and it's also written another example, okay, which is now part of that whole story, okay? But okay, and that's also the following in Shmuel or Bet Ritzpah, that's her name, Bat Aya, et Hashak v'tkavtayu la el hatzur b'tchilat katzir. Okay, namely this woman took, okay, certain items, spread them, and she stayed there, right? Okay, and she said, and so that she could make sure it's a number of psukim, but the story basically tells us the bodies were hanging, and she's there spread out on a blanket or something in order to keep the birds away. Exactly, keep the birds away from attacking the bodies. Okay, so that tries to show further proof that phrase means that the bodies were hanging. Okay, that's the further proof.
And they were left to hang over, right?
Well, that's a good question. That's a question. And then they were taken down. Okay. Okay.
She says they went from the.
No, you can't do it. Right. Okay.
But in this instance, it lasted longer. It wasn't just overnight. That's why
Right.
she spread out,
That's why she
pushed
did.
the birds away
Okay.
from
It's
from her side.
Uktib, and elsewhere it's written in Bamidbar. Vayomer Hashem Moshe et kol roshei ha'am. So now she did that and so to not to allow the birds to attack the body. So that's proof of the term hanging. Then we get another pasuk that tells us that there was a judgment of those heads of the tribes who worshipped Baal Peor. Okay, and what happened there? Okay? Im ha'am chatu, says the Gemara. If the nation were the ones who sinned, Roshei ha'am ma chatu, what sin did the heads of the tribes do? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab, just in the name of Rab, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, okay, chilek lehem batei dinin, okay, make a number of courts, okay, for the different heads of the tribes. My Tama, what would be the reasoning? Okay, Ilema mishum she'ein danin shnayim b'yom echad. If we're saying you cannot do two death penalty cases, okay, and the same day, va'amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, lo shanu ela b'shtei, and I'm going to read into the word here, minei mitot. It was only a question, says Rav Chisda, with regards to two different kinds of capital cases. Aval b'mita achat danim, but with one kind, one variety of capital case, that could be done. Kedei sheyeshuv charon af miYisrael. In other words, in order to remove the anger of, okay, and from Hashem, okay, towards these leaders, and it's directed towards the Jewish people. Okay? Next new piece from our mission. Dinei mamonot gomrin bo bayom. We were saying that the monetary cases, they can be done that day and be concluded the very same day, even perhaps at night. Okay, so what happens? Minahani mili, what's the basis of this? Amar Rabbi Chanina de Amar Kra. Based as Rabbi Chanina on a pasuk, okay, the following. Mileti mishpat tzedek yalin ba va'ata meratzchim. Okay? Again, the source tries to tell us that a conviction in a capital case, okay, it cannot be on the same day, but the debate could be. Right? What do we mean by that? Okay. Rabba Amar, says Rabba, Mehacha. He learns it from the following. Ishru Chamotz. Okay. Which basically was, and she was full of justice. Is that the case? Ishru Diyayin Shemachmitz et Dino. I'm sorry, Ishru Dayan Shemachmitz et Dino. Okay, so what happens there? Okay, I want that, based on that pasuk, we see that a judge who delays his judgment, it's problematic. And Art Scroll number 10 on the page is the note to see more details on that. Okay, the Idach and the other one, okay, who says Ishru Chamotz, as is the pasuk. Why, right? Velo chometz ve'ida. I'm sorry, velo chometz. Okay, that one should encourage one that if one has suffered a theft, one should give support to that person and not the thief. That's the understanding. Okay, so again, the Gemara says ve'idach and the other. Okay, hi maleti mishpat, using this, the pasuk of Maleti Mishpat as his basis. Mai Avidle, what does he do then with that? If he learns it from Ashru Chamotz, right? Okay. Kid Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, as said by Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Kol Ta'anit Shemilinin Bo Et Hatzedakah Ki'ilu Shofech Damim. Okay, that any situation of a fast where one delays providing necessary means to obtain food, I'll put it that way, okay, it's as if they're spilling blood. Shene Amar, as it says in the pasuk, Meleti Mishpat Tzedek V'Gomer. Okay, so in other words, So the Gemara is going to just here give a little bit of a digression. What do we mean by delaying giving tzedakah for someone who needs it because of fasting? Hanimil berifta v'tamre. Here we're talking about bread and dates. Why? Because those are usually distributed at the end of the fast day, and it can be eaten immediately, okay, and it doesn't delay the time of cooking to be able to eat something. Aval bezuze, but regarding giving money, chite, giving wheat or wheat flour, let's put it this way, usaare or barley flour, lit lanba.
No, it's kernels because you have to grind them as a whole pummel.
Okay.
So they
The source I had said flour, not kernels, but you're right in both cases. Okay, it delays their being able to eat. Okay, right. Okay. Lefichach ein danin kule. Again, says our, all right? So what happens here? We're now going to get into the question of the fact that our Mishnah, remember, said that there was, as a result of saying that dinei nefashot must be done, started in the day, and the sentence rendered the next day, our Mishnah told us that there were certain times of the week or occasions where that it prohibited then starting a case of capital variety. For example, Erev Shabbat, okay, would be one case, or Erev Chag, another case. So Gemara is going to want to go into some detail at this point to clarify why do you say that you couldn't start a capital case on Friday? Okay, and therefore, what would the implication be? If the rendered conviction on Shabbos, what would you have to do? Right?
Immediately carry out the sentence.
You'd have to immediately carry out the sentence. That's going to be part of the question that the Gemara wants to clarify. Right?
But these all envision one-day trials.
Okay.
What did
Correct.
he say?
But Steve's one is, don't they envision a single day for the trial? Okay? That the trial starts one day,
Not a capital case that has to carry over to the second
sick
day.
I
to the
know, but I'm
next day,
simply saying, but a trial.
within
can
a
be 4 days,
24-hour
But a
period.
trial can be 4 days or 6 days,
But you
potentially
still
also.
can't do
Yeah.
the trial.
Okay.
And those days trials were, they didn't have forensic evidence, either there were witnesses,
Okay.
they weren't.
Right.
Trials were
The point is that why is it under the circumstances that you say you couldn't start a capital case on Friday and then render the sentencing on Shabbos
Yeah.
and carry out the sentence on Shabbos? That's going to be the Gemara's concern.
Even if they're ready to acquit in a capital case, they always
Correct.
carry it over.
They have to wait till tomorrow.
They-
You
they-
render a
right.
judgment, you have to take
That's the whole
overnight.
point. Okay. And in a court of 23, we've already seen it that if they can't come to a decision, you've got to start adding judges. And it's almost like you start the case all over again. Okay? All right, so let's go on. So the Gemara is going to ask, Ma'itama, what's the reasoning that we have this result of not being able to do the cases on certain situations, case days? Right? Friday's the initial example. Mishum de lo efshar, because it's not possible. Hechi la'aved, how is it possible to do it? L'daine b'malei shabta, then that would mean that you'd have to do the adjudication process Erev Shabbos, v'legamre ledine b'malei shabta, that in theory you'd have to finish the whole adjudication process for the judges, also Erev Shabbos, and carry it. Why? Says the Gemara, Dilma chazutam l'chova. Perhaps because they would see the perspective to convict. Ubai le'me'emad halanat din. And there we're told that they have to defer, I'm going to use the word for the moment, okay? The rendering of the sentencing, all right, to the next day. It's supposed to be done overnight, right? L'daine b'malei shabta, okay? And that would mean that they would have to do the adjudication. The Masava Matan, we've had that word already, right? On Erev Shabbos, Vilegamre B'Shabbata, and they would have to finish their discussion and render their sentencing on Shabbos. Velikle B'Shabta, and kill the person on Shabbos. Ein Ritzicha Dochet HaShabbat. And we say that murder, in other words, carrying out the death sentence, okay, does not put off the Shabbat. That's what would seem to be the implication. Is that the case? Is that really true? Veliktele laorta. Okay, and you'd have to maybe kill him at night.
Can't kill him Shabbos day.
Then you'd have to kill him Motzei Shabbos. That's the point. Okay, neged hashemesh ba'ina. But the pasuk says it has to be done neged hashemesh, during daylight. Ligmare ladine b'shabta. Then let them finish, says the Gemara, their discussion on Shabbos. V'liktele b'chad b'shabta. And then carry out the death penalty on Sunday. Right? Nimtza ata ma'aneh et dino. In that case, you're going to be causing the condemned too much additional agony, says the Gemara. Okay, and nidine. So says the Gemara. If that's the argument you're going to present, nidine b'ma'alei shabta. So let us then do the masau matan, the deliberations, the adjudication on the eve of Shabbat, v'nigmare bechad b'shavta, and then render the sentence on Sunday. Says the Gemara, what happens there? It gives an answer. Minshu ta'amaihu, that it's possible that the Dayanim would forget their arguments. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Afal gav, despite the fact you're saying they're going to forget their arguments, but we know already the process of the court. Namely, we have the two scribes that are there. One writing the ones who say for conviction, one writing the statements of those who say that there is for acquittal. And that's what the Gemara is going to tell us. Al gav de shnei sofrei hadayanim. Even though we've got the two court stenographers, so to speak, right? Omdim lifnehem, they're present there in the courts, right? V'kodvin devrehem mizakin, v'devrehem mechayvin, and they're writing the words of those who advocate conviction and who advocate acquittal. Okay, and so the Gemara says, nehi debepuma katvin. Okay. Let's say, okay, that doesn't this then, despite the fact that the words are coming out of their mouth, it's being recorded. Okay, so the Gemara says, however, the problem is liba de inshe, that the heart, okay, the deliberations, the heartfelt reasoning, okay, as to why they argued, okay, the way they did, could very well be forgotten. Hilkach lo efshar. And therefore, for that reason, doing it that way is not possible. Now, we go on with the following brief digression. Reish Lakish, the Rabbi Yochanan, asks the following. Utehei kvurat meit mitzvah doche Shabbat mikal v'chomer. So couldn't we say that the burial of a mate mitzvah, okay, puts off, okay, so to speak, the Shabbos based on a kal v'chomer, namely, uma avodah shedoche Shabbat, okay, in the same way that carrying out the sacred worship, okay, overrides, I'm going to use that word for the moment, okay, doche, overrides Shabbat, kvurat mate mitzvah doche ota. So don't we say then that the burial of a mate mitzvah also overrides it? Okay. What happens? Mala'achoto kedatani. And we learn that from the pasuk, which refers to la'achoto, his sister, as taught in a Braita, la'aviv ule'imo, la'achiv ula'achoto. Okay, burial for the father, the mother, the brother, the sister. Ma Talmud Lomar, the same way the text comes to teach us. Harei shahaya holech l'shchot et pischo. Namely, says the Braita, if somebody is on the way to do a mitzvah, namely to slaughter his paschal sacrifice, ulamul et beno, or to circumcise his son, and what happens as we go to the top of the new Amud, right? V'shama shamet lo mate, and he hears that he has had a death in the family. Yachol yitame, it's possible for him to become tame. Okay, what are we talking about here? All right, hold on a second. Okay. Right, exactly. Yachol yitame. What happens? Amart lo yitame. You might say, no, he shouldn't become impure. Yachol should amart lo yitame. The amart lo yitame. Okay, right? Yachol kashem she'eno mitame la'achoto. Okay, kach eino mitame lamet mitzvah. So this is his argument. The same way there, you might have thought he couldn't, but the answer is no. The mate mitzvah then does doche, doing the mitzvah, doing Shabbat. Talmud loma. Sorry. Okay, says the text. La'achoto, to his sister. La'achoto hu de'eno mitame. For his sister, then he would not become tum. Aval mitame lamate mitzvah. Okay, that he could become tomei in fulfilling the mitzvah of mate mitzvah. Shabbat shenidchet mipnei avodah eino din shetehei kvurat mate mitzvah docheota. If that's the case, he argues. Sorry again. Okay, if that's the case, Shabbat, where we say it's overridden by ritual service, okay, is it not logical that the burial of the mate mitzvah is also, since it overrides the avoda, okay, it would certainly then override Shabbat. That's his question. Amarle, he says, Ritzchicha tochiach, says Rabbi Yochanan. The issue of putting to death is our proof. Shedoche et ha'avodah, that may override the sacred worship. Ve'ena dochet haShabbat, but it does not override the Shabbat. Okay, this is the challenge that the Gemara presents. Ritzicha gufa tidche et haShabbat mikal v'chomer. We might argue that the act of capital punishment, all right, itself should override the Shabbat based on a kal v'chomer. Namely, as it presents it, ma avodah shedochet haShabbat. This fact that sacred worship overrides Shabbat. Ritzicha, that of carrying out capital punishment, doche ota, that would override that. Shenama.
The murderer is going puddle. It's dry. They don't let him finish up.
Right. In other words, he would still be held accountable and would still be
Even
case.
though he couldn't.
Right. What happens? Shenamar, as it says, Me'im mizbachi tikachenu lamut. From my mizbeach, from my altar, you should take him to die. In other words, if you can do that, that's the pasuk one might use to try to prove. What? Exactly. Now, what happens? Shabbat shenidchet mipnei avodah. The Sabbath, then, which has been overridden regarding I'm going to say by the sacred worship, no din, is it not logical? Shetehei ritzicha docheota. Is it not logical then that carrying out the death penalty since I'm using that pasuk as my example, that should also override the Shabbat. Okay. Amar Rava, says Rava as follows. Far Paskat Tana Debe Rabbi Yishmael. There already was a ruling by one of the Tanaim of the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, the Tana Debe Rabbi Yishmael, as was taught in Rabbi Yishmael's Academy, Lo Tivaru Eish, that one does not light kindle. Okay, I'll put that way. Ma Talmud Lomar. What is it coming to tell? It says, Ma Talmud Lomar. What do you mean? What are you asking? What does it come to teach us? There's already an extensive discussion, which the Gemara is only going to review in very briefly here. Okay, what are we going to learn there? Okay, Ma Talmud Lomar, either Rabbi Yossi. If we're going to say it, it's according to Rabbi Yossi. Lelav Yatzad. It was separated merely as a lav, as a prohibition, and not as a capital crime. Okay? Rabbi Natan. And if it's according to the view of Rabbi Natan, lechalek yatzad. It was singled out to show that it's a malacha, and it's that there are different separate categories of liability. Right. Okay. Kidetanya, as was taught in the Braita, havara lelav yatzad. That kindling was segregated, taken out, okay, as a prohibition, divrei Rabbi Yossi. That was the argument of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Natsan Omer, he says, lechalek yatsa. No, it went out to show that each malacha is an act in and of itself and punishable as a separate act. Okay? El Amar Rava, but says Rava, Tana Moshavot. Rava now says, wait a second, I'm going to give you a different example based on a different pasuk. Okay, at the end of that pasuk, we have it says, it makes a reference to your habitations, in quotes. Okay, all right? Kasha, lay, that was problematic for him. Moshavot, Matam Lomar. What does it mean by the use of that place? Moshavot. Michdei, since Shabbat Chovat Hagufri, since observance of Shabbat is a physical act, right? Okay, and v'chovat haguf no heget bein ba'aretz ubein b'chutz la'aretz, and the carrying out of that bodily act is a personal act, must be done both within the land and outside of the land, right? Right? Moshavot dichtav rachmana lamali. Then why does the text? Sorry again. Why is the text using the language of Moshavot? Wouldn't it have been better had the pasuk written something else? Wouldn't it?
Most of the time, Moshavot means.
Well, we'll get to that. We're going to get to that. Hold on. We'll get to it. Hold on. Well, we'll get to that. Okay? Moshavot dichtav rachmana lamali. Why was the phrase Moshavot utilized? Okay? Namely, the fact is that, says the Gemara, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Talmid Echad, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, a Talmud said, Lafi Shene Amar. Why? Because normally Moshavot refers to situations outside the land of Israel only. But, right, what happens? Ki yihye be'ish chet mishpat, mot v'humat. Shomea ani. When the pasuk says, when there will be for a person a judgment, okay, that requires death penalty and put to death. Shomea ani, bein b'chol, bein b'shabbat. I would normally think that would apply whether weekday or Shabbat. Baha, ma'ani mekayem. But then how do I maintain the phrase, the pasuk, mechaleha mot yumat? Okay, that one who desecrates the Sabbath is put to death. Bishar melachot chutz memitat beitin. I may have thought that that would apply to all other kinds of violations of the categories of work, with the exception of a death penalty declared by the court. Oh, no ella afilu mitat bedin. Or are we talking also to include a death penalty compelled by the court, determined by the court? Uma ani mekayem. And then how do I maintain v'humat bachol aval lo b'Shabbat, that one is put to death on a weekday and not on Shabbat? Oh, eno ela afilu b'Shabbat, or perhaps means even also on Shabbat. Talmud lomar. Therefore, I determine, based on the fact, of our discussion of the pasuk, lo tivaru esh bechol moshvotechem, where it says that you should not kindle fire in any of your quotes habitations. Ulahalan, and later on it says, hu omer vahayu ele lechem l'chukat mishpat ledorotechem bechol moshvotechem, that this shall be a practice of law for all generations in where all your habitations, wherever you happen to be. What happens? What do I do? Ma moshvot ha'amur lahalan beitin. Since we could say that at one habitation is the existence of the Beis Din, that happens. Af moshavot ha'amur kan beitin. So likewise here too, we say that Moshavot applies to the Beis Din.
I had a question on this. How come if this pasuk clearly says, seems to me, that a Bezin would do death in Brooklyn? So where did the notion that in Bavel they can't put death towards us? This pasuk seems to say, but they didn't anywhere.
Okay,
I didn't
good,
have an answer.
good question. Okay.
Because maybe I could venture a guess that in Bavel they did not do Dinei Nefesh, right?
No,
didn't have
they
the
didn't.
smicha.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
this pasuk
The pasuk would seem to
indicate
imply that it
there
should
is
be
not
permitted.
a restriction on being a Muslim.
Right.
If you could, this pasuk says the same rules apply, and if you break the rules in Brooklyn, put him to death in Brooklyn.
Okay. My answer would be the fact that their habitation in Bavel was only considered temporary.
So,
Okay, and
right,
that eventually,
pasuk says the rules.
I understand, but if the concept was such that it was remember, it was only after, I believe, Yeshayahu completely said to them, build homes, build, etc., etc. Okay, or Yirmiyahu, okay, said that clearly. In other words, to settle there, to be there, to make it, okay, in that case, right? Particularly after you had the second exile. Right? I understand. Okay? Va'amar Rachmana, and then the Torah tells us, Lo tivaru eish b'chol moshvotechem, and therefore it says you should not kindle in all your habitations. Therefore, that means you cannot carry out the death penalty on Shabbat. Amar Abaye. And so Abaye now has a problem. Hashta da'amart, ein ritzicha dochet haShabbat. Now that you've brought the statement that informs us that a death penalty cannot override the Shabbat, ein ritzicha dochet ha'avodah mikal v'chomer. Perhaps we're also going to argue that a death penalty cannot override sacred worship by a kal v'chomer. Okay, right? Uma Shabbat shenidchet mipnei ha'avodah, whereas Shabbat, which is overridden by the sacred service, ein ritzicha doche ota, and that death penalty does not override it, namely the sacred service. Gemara answers, Avodah shehi dochet haShabbat, the part of sacred service that overrides Shabbat, ein no din, is it not logical? Shelo tehe ritzicha doche ota, is it not logical that the death penalty should override that? Ela ha t'dichti. But this is what's written. Me'im mizbechi tikachenu lamut. From my altar you should take him to die. Namely, hahu lekorban yachid delo dache Shabbat. That applies in a situation where we're talking an individual bringing an offering, that it doesn't override Shabbat. Ma Rava, says Rava, ihachi, if that's the case, lo tehe ritzicha doche korban yachid mikal v'chomer. We would therefore say that the death penalty does not override an individual offering based on a kal v'chomer. We'll go over just a little bit on the top of Lamed Vav. Ma yom tov shenidche mipnei korban yachid. But we say that regarding Yom Tov, okay, that it is overridden by an individual offering. Okay? Ein ritzicha doche oto. But nevertheless, the death penalty does not override a Yom Tov. Korban yachid shahu doche et Yom Tov. Eino din shelo tehe ritzicha doche oto. Okay, with a individual offering, is it not logical, okay, that death penalty should override it? So the Gemara tries, and here we're going to come to our closing. Hanichelaman amar ein nidarim v'nidavot krevin b'yom tov. That's acceptable to the one whose view is that we do not make individual private offerings, vows, etc., of that kind on Yom Tov. Elelaman da'amar nidarim v'nidavot krevin b'yom tov. But according to the one who says you could carry out individual offerings of vows or oaths, okay? My ikalamema, what can we say? Tune in tomorrow, okay? That's where we'll pick up.
That comes from radio.
Uh-huh. I notice you're the chairman of the nominating committee. I did that for 2 years. But and I want to give you one piece of advice, if you don't mind. One of the hardest positions to uh, fill, believe it or not, was Gabbai Rishon.
There's no issue on that.
Speak can't continue.
He's continuing as an intern.
As an intern.
Nobody. I'm pushing my order. I had to go and appoint a committee.
Yeah. And they published the committee.
I took that. I made that selection, yes, absolutely. And, and was able to make lots of phone calls while on the cruise and emails and whatever else like that. And I wound up as best I could. But the best thing about the whole thing, about the process, and I knew this, is that I've been asked lots of people to be on this ticket or that ticket, and the chair of the nominating committee, I can't.
No, people ask you to be on,
My ticket, and this or that.
oh, you can't be, you can't run for, no, you can't. However, realize that even though that's true as the chairman of the nominating committee, if there's somebody who's going on the board for some reason, they try to appoint you to be a board member. Juice, good morning. Juice, we had a problem. We couldn't figure out how to turn the television on.
There's a switch that says on.
No, there is no switch.
Oh. Listen, you don't think that violating the law and having a 53-year-old is not okay?
I didn't think.
Well, you said it's not a but if you're on the radio, how can you expect a doctor to have moral authority if he violates the exclusive?
No, because the woman already made an exception as far as that.
Well, they do that. Let me tell you something. The reason adult community doesn't take school is to be 55 and one who violates would subject us to the possibility of having to take.
But that's the rule. Okay, so if 80% of the residents have to,
there is grounds for exception.
well, that means 20%,
Younger,
20% can, 20% may be, okay, that's the case. And the question is, how do you define what goes into that 20%? So for example, one case could be if when I bought, I was only 53 and my wife was 55.
So does that count?
Yes, it
Okay,
counts.
that counts in the 20.
No, that would be a regular situation. That would be, okay, that would be,
The rule is, you will understand your wife had to pick into your farm for you to be there. So she wants to go to
no, come on.
Oh, you mean if she's back in the community?
No, I can't believe that. Ownership. It's based on ownership, not on residence. I remember that there was a young couple living on the floor. Then they still live there. They're on the third floor. I think they still live. They certainly, neither one of them was certainly over